Hi there. My name is Ron Rogers, and I was fortunate enough to be a chase pilot out at Edwards Flight Test Center out in California in the late 70s. And it goes without saying that it is the premier flight test center of the world and one of the greatest places to be a pilot. It was really, at that time, quite a flying club. Now we had the base, we had the lake beds, which is why it was selected for this location up in the Mojave Desert for several reasons. Of course, it was out of the normal path of everybody else. It was isolated. That's where they did the initial testing on a number of very important vehicles, and mainly they had the lake beds. And the lake beds were extremely useful and have saved many, many aircraft that came back with things like missing a nose gear or a hydraulic problem. Um, this is probably runway 17, one of the most typical runways we used. It was later configured uh, after I was out there for use for the space shuttle. The space shuttle was early in the program. It was just doing the gliding tests when I was out there in the late 70s. It had not yet flown in space. But the lake bed was very useful on recovering aircraft with problems. I chased many of aircraft to the lake bed that had issues, and with the main runway 4.5 miles long and plenty wide. Didn't matter if you went off the side, didn't matter if you went long, and if 4.5 miles wasn't good enough for you, we had 7.5 miles. In fact, I had a Learjet with a loss of hydraulics, had no brakes, and I talked to him and I said, "Well, we got the runway 17. It's 4.5 miles long. Is that good enough?" I said, "If not, we got a longer one." And I met him later at base ops, and he says, "You got one longer than 4.5 miles?" No, that was quite sufficient. Well, at the time we did the release testing, just the glide testing of the space shuttle. Of course, it later used the Edwards runways at various times to recover the aircraft. And of course, initially, where it was still a new vehicle, and they wanted plenty of air for margin. But I had worked with the NASA people quite a lot. Being the officer in charge of current operations, I helped them with the ranges, the test aircraft, and support anytime they needed it. So I was on very friendly terms with them, and I had provided as a chase pilot support on a number of chase missions. And they said to me, they said, "Hey, would you like to fly the F-104?" And I go, "I would love to fly the F-104. I actually got invited back later to fly the F-18, about 20 years later, well out of the Air Force. But anyway, they said, "Would you like to fly the F-104?" And I go, "Yeah." So we go out there and they say, "Well, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, what can we do?" And they said, "Well, one of the things we can do is we can fly simulated shuttle approaches." Of course, we got the lake bed runways, and there's a lot of options out there. And they mark the lake bed runways, typically with kind of a tar substance, so you can see the lake bed. Because I'm told, I've never landed on water as a pilot, um, but I'm told that it's equivalent to a glassy condition water landing because you can't tell your height. So basically, what we'd do. And we were, of course, checked out on landing on the runways, and I checked people out on landing on the runways when I was a senior flight examiner uh, in the T-38 out there. So the deal is you would land near one of these lines, typically the center line, and you could kind of look at that and get height, but it was still extremely difficult. You basically set up a descent rate and just waited to touch. Well, we talked about doing the shuttle approaches. Okay, so um, I flew the F-104 a number of times, and the pilots I flew with were X-15 pilots, um, and some of the early shuttle pilots in that. I flew the F-18 with a very experienced shuttle pilot many years later. But basically, what we did, we went above the airfield at 30,000 feet, and we pulled the power to idle, put the speed brakes out, gear, and full flaps. Now, if you know anything about an F-104, it doesn't glide well when it's clean. But you put all this stuff out, you're really coming around. Well, the typical descent rate was 12,000 feet per minute, and you're doing a 30-degree angle approach. Now, Anybody's a pilot knows that you can have a little bug spot, a line of sight, and when you fly a 3-degree approach, you can kind of vary that, see where you're going to touch down. Well, we played lift over drag maximum. Uh, we came down at 280, which is L over D max for this configuration. And if you needed to adjust your aim point, because we were just a glider, power wasn't to be used, so we're just a glider, and you could vary your airspeed to adjust the aim point, and it really changed rapidly. So you could really see changes occurring rapidly. And Bill, who was the pilot I flew with the first time, showed me an approach, and great. So we put it into burner, take off, clean it up. I start the climb back to 30,000 feet, get it configured, start the turn. I'm coming around. You roll out on final at about 12,000, about 10,000 feet, 280 knots with a 12,000 foot per minute rate of descent. And you're looking pretty steep on the runway. And as we're coming in to the flare, I said, Bill, I forgot when you said to flare. What are the parameters again? He goes, well, about 2,500 feet or when you get scared, whichever occurs first. So at 2,500 feet, I began a nice approximately 3G pull, not 2.5G pull, to we went from 280 to 180 in about 2.5 seconds, touchdown, and put it into burner, and away we went. We came back around for another one. So I shot several of those. Those were a lot of fun. And I've seen video on the shuttle. The shuttle comes down at approximately a 24-degree glide path. In the 104, it was a 30-degree glide path. And even the 24, it looks a lot steeper from the airplane I was in than the views you get sometimes from the camera in the shuttle. So I don't know if it's you got better peripheral vision or what, but you're really coming down like a rock. And even we had a specially equipped T-38 that was used in the test pilot school that had larger than normal speed brakes, so it could come down at a 20-degree angle. But that was the steepest angle it would come down without gaining airspeed. So even that was quite impressive. So it was a fun time. I did that on a number of missions with him, and I flew with some of the greatest pilots in the world, and it was an absolute joy. Thanks for watching.